finally finished upgrading the Losi mini rock crawler. It's a completely different rig, much larger, almost 1/10 scale now. So I just wanted to go over it a little bit and talk about what a couple of things I've done to it. I got it a while back from one of the guys at the group crawl. I didn't really have an idea what I was going to do to it then. When I got it home, I determined that it looked too much like my other Vatera Slick Rock and my Losi Mini Rock Crawler Pro, so I wanted to do a little upgrading to it. And what happened was I did a whole lot of upgrading to it. It's now a motor on axle crawler, dual steer, just a little beast. So let's pop the top off and talk about it a little bit. I'll talk about the top a little later. So first I'm going to start with the axles. In the front and rear, I've installed RC 4-wheel drive axles. These are motor on axle axles with 45 turn RC 4-wheel drive crawler motors on each end. Two of them because it's dual motor on axle. The original transmission and electronics have all been pulled out, so there's no drive shaft to worry about. The motor controls the whole axle by itself, in case you're not familiar with the motor on axle setup. Just a different way to control the wheels. Some people like them, some people don't. I just think it's different, and that's what went into this build. These are full size, they call them 2.2, but they're 10 scale axles. They originally kind of go on a RC 4-wheel drive product called a Bully. It's a motor on axle crawler. These are actually the axles for that crawler. As I said before, they're powered by RC 4-wheel drive 45 turn motors. That's the first time I've used a RC 4-wheel drive motor, so I'm anxious to see how they perform. I've heard nothing but good things about them, and at the price of $10, I really can afford for them to go bad. It'll be okay. So RC 4-wheel drive motors, the high-tech servos on both ends, front and back. The rear one has been reversed by a high-tech digital programmer. I like the 5646 WP. It's a good all-around servo. Not the highest torque rating, but it works well. It's a high-tech, it's Metal Gear, and it's factory waterproof, which is a big deal for me. I don't like to do my own waterproofing, so a factory waterproof servo is always a good deal for me. In order to get the servos mounted, I had to build custom towers. You can barely see under the servo now. The custom servo plates I had to make out of a Lexan sheet. I did that out of my typical .080 Lexan sheet. This one I didn't have a template for. I had to just kind of wing it. I got an idea of how big I wanted it and where I wanted it to fit, and I basically just cut it out, and there's a few spacers underneath to kind of get it in the right height for this servo. It needs to sit up just a little bit in order to clear the lower link. As you can see, there's just a little bit of angle to that, but that won't harm anything. It'll be just fine. RC 4-wheel drive provided the steering links in the front and the rear. 6x70 and 6x100 millimeter. So 70 millimeter and 100 millimeter link. These are coupled with the axial rod ends, which I use pretty much throughout the whole build. All the rod ends on here are axial from axial kits, assorted pieces from axial kits. The shocks here are Wraith shocks, outfitted with STRC bodies, caps, and then the hardware on the inside is all axial stock stuff. I like the way that stuff performs, built correctly. A lot of people say that Wraith shocks leak. I haven't had so much of a problem, so I'll continue to use them. Oh, is your hair in your eyes? Let me move that out of the way for you. Oh, hey! I wasn't doing anything. The suspension links that I use are all axial stuff from the upgrade link set for the SEX10, and they provided me with 4 91mm links and a couple of smaller links for the top, which I had to use some spacers for, and again I used the axial rod ends in order to complete the suspension links. In order to make the shocks work, I had to use another axial rod to extend the shock mount out a little bit. The original shocks were mounted inside. This was a very small vehicle, so I used 2 axial rods to push out the shocks. In order to fit the electronics and the batteries the way I wanted to, I had to do a little cutting on this top plate. It had a little barrier here to stop the stock battery from sliding out, but since the battery I'm going to be using is a little bit longer, I cut that out in order to give the battery a little bit more space. On the other side, I've installed a Spectrum SR200WP, just a standard 2-channel waterproof receiver from Spectrum. Also a Sidewinder 3, my old standby. I love that Sidewinder. I never have any problems out of it. I use it in multiple crawlers. The people who use them love them. The people who don't kind of wrinkle their noses at them, but I haven't had any problem out of them, and until I do, I'll keep using them. I have a external BEC on there just because the application needs it. You might be able to get away with the onboard BEC, but I wouldn't try it. I'd go ahead and install an external Castle BEC just for safety's sake and to enable to push these servos to the maximum ability. For wheels and tires, I used all Proline stuff. These are Proline Interco TSL Super Swampers 1.9. This will be my first experience with the authentic TSLs. I had a pair of Terra Super Swampers, which aren't quite the same thing. Much different compound, much stiffer tire, much harder foam. So I'm anxious to see how these work out. I don't think they'll do bad at all. They have great knob on them, and I vented the wheels in order to give them a nice plush. The wheels are also Proline stuff, Proline Faultline 1.9 with 32 screws in each wheel. The tires look great. There's a metal, the bead lock is a metal piece with a plastic actual wheel, but metal bead locks on both sides. I upgraded the body posts. The stock body posts were a little short and they weren't really very beefy. I was going to put a larger body on there than the stock body. I went with the Proline, another Proline product. This is called Desert Militia. I think it looks really good on this crawler. Painted it gunmetal with black top and back side. These are Tamiya polycarbonate spray. So I think that turned out really good. Not too much stickers. I'm not a big fan of stickers. Very minimal. Put a few stickers in the back, and anything I use, anything I build that has axial parts, I gotta slam an axial sticker on there. So of course I did that. But yeah, that's about it for the upgrades for the Losi mini rock crawler. It is a completely different machine now. I think basically the only thing that's left from the beginning is the actual body which I even modded the top like I talked about before. But just the chassis is basically all that's left from the original vehicle. So this is a completely custom mini rock crawler.